Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Beth Gallick, Executive Director of the Bay Area Manufacturers Association. This webinar is made possible thanks to the FloridaMakes Network. The FloridaMakes Network mission is to improve the productivity and technological performance of Florida's manufacturing sector. The FloridaMakes Network is an industry-led initiative operated by Florida's regional manufacturers associations in partnership with industry research, educational and economic development organizations, both public and private, at the state and national levels. The network provides services focused on three principal value streams: technology adoption, talent development, and business growth. BAMA, your host for today's webinar, is proud to be part of the FloridaMakes Network. We support manufacturers and promote economic development in the Tampa Bay region. BAMA provides a forum to exchange ideas and share best practice information, network with colleagues, and learn about manufacturing-related topics through educational programs and tours. BAMA supports STEM programs and offers scholarships to students pursuing manufacturing and STEM education. If you would like to know more about us, please check out our website, www.bama-fl.org. If you're an attendee from a county that BAMA does not service, please contact FloridaMakes so they can connect you to your local regional manufacturers associations. As a participant, your audio will be in listen-only mode using your phone or computer, whichever is more convenient. There is an opportunity to ask your questions using the question window. Add your questions there, and we will address those as time allows at the end of each presentation. This is a live webinar event which will be recorded. A link to the recording will be provided to you within a few days. Today's presentation is titled COVID-19 Best Practices, Legislation, Staffing, and Marketing. We do have upcoming webinars in the series, so please look out for those. I would like to present our first speaker, Grant Peterson. Grant is a stakeholder in the Tampa office of Ogletree Deakins, the third largest law firm in the U.S., representing and counseling employers in all areas of labor and employment law. For the past 40 years, Mr. Peterson has helped employers comply with U.S. and international labor and employment laws, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and international data protection and privacy laws. Since 2007, Mr. Peterson has been listed in the annual editions of Best Lawyers in America and Florida Super Lawyers in the areas of labor and employment law. Additionally, Mr. Peterson has been listed in the National Law Journal's edition of Tampa's Best Lawyers since 2011. Mr. Peterson currently serves as a board member of the Bay Area Manufacturers Association and has been a member of BAMA since 1986. Welcome, Grant.
Thank you, Beth. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to cover the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, what manufacturers need to know. Basically, the FFCRA does three things. It expands the FMLA to the emergency FMLA, creates a new paid sick leave, and mandates certain benefits and permits certain tax credits to pay for the items that are covered under the Families First Act. Looks like I'm having a little bit of trouble here, Beth, advancing my slides.
Okay.
Basically, the two benefits to employers under this law are that it incentivizes states to loosen unemployment compensation requirements and not to have benefits that affect tax ratings. And the state of Florida has signed up for the CARES Act portion of the unemployment compensation benefits. Additionally, it creates tax credits for employers that provide E-FMLA and EPSL benefits. Before we dive into the FFCRA, please don't forget that other leaves will still apply. If you have leaves under your policies, you need to follow those leave policies. We need to continue to monitor our state and local leave laws to see if they've been changed to allow us to provide additional benefits other than what's been provided under the FFCRA. Additionally, we need to keep in mind that the traditional FMLA and ADA leaves will still apply even during the time that the FFCRA benefits will be applicable. And as we know, under the typical FMLA leave, it's unpaid and it permits people to take leave for their own serious health condition or to care for a family serious health condition. Additionally, the ADA may come into play because the coronavirus and any attendant symptoms or issues may be deemed a disability under the ADA, and leave can be a reasonable accommodation under the ADA. Pat, it looks like you should take over the slides because I'm having difficulty doing that. If you could advance the slide for me, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's now dive into the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Next slide, please. It is effective starting today and will be applicable through December 31st, 2020. And basically, we just need to know that any leave that we've given prior to April 1, for the reasons we are about to talk about, it gets no credit under these new requirements. Next slide, please. Okay, who does the FFCRA apply to? Basically, it's employers with less than 500 employees. Well, how do we count our employees? Basically, we start with our W-2 employees and that number. Then we add to that figure any temporary employees, leased employees, or other shared employees, and that's our number. Basically, the number counts as of the day an employee requests benefits under the FFCRA. Next slide, please. Basically, we're still counting because the E-FMLA and also now the EPSL will look at whether or not we're an integrated employer, which means that typically if we are part of a large organization, each business is typically considered to be a single employer. However, if your organization and the single employers that you have within the system have common management, interrelation between operations, centralized control of labor relations, and a degree of common ownership, then it could very well be that you will count that 500 employee figure across your entire organization and not just single business units. The key factor here is whether or not you have centralized control of labor relations. That's the predominant requirement to take a look at to see if you can count all of your employees. Additionally, we can only count our US employees and employees that are part of any US territory, such as Puerto Rico. Next slide, please. Okay, question has come up, well, what about if I'm an employer under 50 employees? Aren't we exempt? And the answer to that is no, unless the Department of Labor says you can opt out. And basically the DOL is passing regulations and has provided certain regulations to date that says that if you are an employer with fewer than 50 employees and you can prove that providing the paid leave for school closures only, and we'll talk about all the different ways that this act applies in the different circumstances, and providing the paid leave would jeopardize your ability to continue as an ongoing concern, then basically you can apply to be exempt from this requirement. We will get into greater detail on that a little bit later. Next slide, please. One of the requirements that we need to immediately engage in is we need to post or provide the notice that the Department of Labor has provided to alert employees as to the rights under the FFCRA. I've given you the website address to download that poster, and we need to post this in conspicuous locations where we typically post other employee postings in all work locations that we have. We also need to email or direct mail the notice to employees that are not presently at our work locations but are still employees. And I recommend that we also post via either intranet or external website to be able to reach those employees, especially if we cannot reach them otherwise. We also need to be wary of the fact that probably we'll get other guidance from the Department of Labor over the next day, week, and months probably, and so we need to keep up to date. Next slide, please. What happens if we don't comply with the FFCRA? Basically, we're going to be on the hook for the same type of penalties that we would be on the hook for if we violated the Fair Labor Standards Act, and we would have to pay unpaid wages, an equal amount as liquidated damages, and any attorney's fees and costs, and we may be subject to certain injunctive relief, including reinstating employees that we have improperly terminated against the FFCRA requirements. Next slide, please. All right, there are two parts to the FFCRA. The first, as I mentioned, is the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act expansion, and the second is the paid leave portion. Let's talk first about the E-FMLA. Next slide, please. What we need to know about this is that the E-FMLA is actually going to coordinate with our usual FMLA requirements. For example, if employees have already taken FMLA leave, basically the E-FMLA will only be applicable to whatever is remaining on their 12 weeks, so that it's not a total of 12 weeks of E-FMLA leave, it's a total of 12 weeks in total, with FMLA and E-FMLA leave being applicable. Basically, the E-FMLA only applies to one type of COVID-19 situation, and that is if you have an employee that's a minor child, the child's school or daycare closes because of the COVID-19 concerns, or if the child's normal paid care provider is unavailable because of COVID-19, and as a result, you cannot work or telework, then basically you need to take care of the child. You can apply for the E-FMLA. The key here is that basically if there's any other reason why this individual is off, basically it will not apply to the E-FMLA benefits. Next slide, please. All right, so what are the key points here? Unlike the FMLA, basically the E-FMLA is going to apply to manufacturers that have fewer than 500 employees. And basically, it's going to be an employee who has been on the payroll for more than 30 calendar days, whether they've been working or not. And additionally, if it's a relatively new hire and they're not eligible at the time that they request this leave, if they become eligible because they're still on the payroll at the time that the leave is to start, then they will be entitled to the E-FMLA leave once they hit that 30 days. Next slide, please. The new CARES Act that was just signed by President Trump, the Economic Recovery Act basically has also revised the E-FMLA to include that employees who were laid off by an employer not earlier than March 1, 2020, who had worked for the employer for at least 30 days of the last 60 calendar days prior to the layoff and have been rehired by the employer will also be eligible for the E-FMLA benefits. Next slide, please. Okay, E-FMLA. Basically, it's unpaid for the first 2 weeks, but as we'll talk about in a second, they may be entitled to that first 2 weeks under the EPSL payments, and it will provide to employees for the weeks 3 through 12, or how many weeks they have left on their FMLA bank, 2/3 of their regular rate, and we need to take a look at over the past 6 months what that regular rate is. And the regular rate basically is what they've received that would include all non-discretionary bonuses, commissions, any type of payments that have been provided to them, except that we do not need to include the overtime premium as part of that pay. This benefit is capped at $200 per day, and we cannot, as employers, require employees to supplement with other paid leaves, and the employee cannot demand that we do so, but we can agree between the employer and the employee to supplement this benefit. Next slide, please. Other key items here is that intermittent leave, which we typically deal with under the FMLA, basically like the FMLA, under the E-FMLA, will only be granted by an agreement between the employee and the employer. Additionally, if we decide that we need to close our facility, furlough employees for business reasons, then the E-FMLA leave that has been granted will then stop. And the key here to remember under both the E-FMLA and the EPSL is that if we send people home because of business reasons unrelated to COVID-19, then none of these benefits under the FFCRA will be applicable. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that we can require individuals to provide us with documentation proving that they qualify for the E-FMLA. And we need to get this documentation because if we want to apply for the tax credit for the payments made, we need to have this documentation. So for example, for the E-FMLA purposes, we ought to get from the employee a notice from their child care or school, et cetera, that it's been closed and that the student has been required to stay at home in order to both grant the E-FMLA leave and to get the tax credits. Next slide, please. All right, let's talk about the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act portion of the FFCRA. Next slide, please. As I had mentioned, it's only applicable to employers with fewer than 500 employees. However, larger employees can offer this benefit. And basically, we need to keep in mind that the state of Florida or local governments may ultimately mandate this, and if so, then we would need to pay it as a large employer. But larger employers are not required to pay this EPSL and are not eligible for tax credits. Next slide, please. Okay, who's eligible for the paid sick leave? Basically, unlike the E-FMLA, there is no requirement for employees to satisfy. It doesn't matter how long they've been with us. There's no service requirements. There's no waiting period. And all covered employees and employers have the same obligation. Next slide, please. Okay, when can this paid sick leave be used? There's only certain criteria that will permit the paid leave to be paid. if there is a state or local quarantine or isolation order, or if individuals are self-quarantining themselves at a healthcare provider's advice, if they are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and are seeking medical diagnoses, or if they're caring for an individual that are subject to the quarantine or self-quarantine issues, if they're caring for a son or daughter whose school or place of care has been closed because of COVID-19, and there's going to be other substantially similar conditions that the Secretary of Health and Human Services will be providing, but we do not have yet. The key here is, again, if individuals are not working because of lack of work, we've decided to close our business, we've decided to lay off people because of lack of work, then the paid sick leave will not be applicable to those employees. Next slide, please. Okay, what do individuals get under the paid sick leave? Full-time employees get 80 hours of paid sick leave. Part-time employees will get the number of hours they work on average over a 2-week period. For example, if a part-time employee averages 24 hours a week, they will then get 48 hours total of this paid sick leave. If we've got employees with variable schedules, we need to take the average daily hours scheduled in the last 6 months in order to decide how much they get during this 2-week period. Next slide, please. Okay, unlike the E-FMLA, all paid sick leave is paid during this 2-week or 80-hour period. And the pay, again, is calculated based on the regular rate, or if it's below the minimum wage, obviously we need to apply the minimum wage amounts. However, paid sick leave is capped. It's capped at $511 per day per employee, and the aggregate over this time period obviously would then be $5,110. However, if employees are absent for the care of others, and as I mentioned to you before, there are reasons where employees stay off on their own because of the COVID-19, and then there are reasons why they are off because they're caring for others. If they're caring for others, they're only entitled to 2/3 of their regular rate, and this would be capped at $200 per day or $2,000 in the aggregate. Next slide, please. The FFCRA does indicate that employees are required to provide some notice to us. If they're off on leave, we can require them to check in on a reasonable notice procedure basis to let us know how long they'll continue to be off and when they might be returning. However, there's no provision for them to give us notice before they take the first day off with paid leave. All of our other employer policies that may require advance notice should be reviewed, and we should only use the advance notice requirements for those other employer policies that are unrelated to the paid sick leave. Next slide, please. Other key pieces of this legislation is that any unused paid sick leave does not carry over into subsequent years. It ends as of December 31st, 2020. And if an employee terminates without using this leave, we are not required to pay that out at termination or resignation or retirement. Next slide, please. We need to keep in mind that the FFCRA leaves and benefits are in addition to other paid leaves. Also, we cannot require individuals to use these other paid leaves before they use the paid sick leave benefits. Next slide, please. All right, so the interaction between these two pieces of the FFCRA are that the paid sick leave and the E-FMLA both provide leave when an employee's child is home because their school or child care provider is unavailable. Basically, again, you should know that regular FMLA and E-FMLA, in fact, are coordinated so that employees only get a total of 12 weeks of the E-FMLA. Also, as we just mentioned, the paid sick leave applies for the first 2 weeks of the leave, and then the E-FMLA picks up after that 2-week period. And that's when the E-FMLA individuals receive 2/3 of their regular rate. Next slide, please. All right, there are other benefit mandates and tax credits that we can tap into. Let's see what we can do. Next slide, please. The FCCRA indicates that our group health plans must provide full coverage for any coronavirus testing, all costs associated with those. Next slide. Also, our group health plans have to cover any type of visit that would be associated with the testing, including in-person telehealth visits, urgent care visits, emergency visits, etc., so long as it deals with the testing portion of the coronavirus. Next slide, please. Interestingly, the FCCRA does not require that our group health plans cover any treatment associated with the coronavirus. However, the IRS has put out certain guidance that will permit group health plans to cover both testing and treatment, and those will become clearer as more guidance is provided. Next slide, please. Okay, here's how we can pay for the benefits that we need to pay out under the FFCRA. Employers that have fewer than 500 employees can get tax credits on the amounts paid to employees who go out on the qualified leaves, and we can get tax credits on the cost to maintain health insurance coverage for employees while they're on these leaves. Next slide, please. The basis for the tax credits are that the payments are not considered to be wages subject to Social Security tax or Medicare tax, and employers will receive refundable credits towards the employer's quarterly share of these taxes. Next slide, please. If we pay out benefits under E-FMLA, the credit is equal to the amount that we would pay in payroll taxes during the quarter, subject to certain limits. We can get up to $200 per day for E-FMLA, and that's capped at $10,000 per employee for the entire leave period. Next slide, please. For the paid sick leave, we can get a credit limited to the 10 days of paid sick leave total per employee. And it depends on why the employee is out that will determine how much credit we get. There are 2 tiers. Tier 1 is those reasons where the employee is caring for somebody else. And tier 2 is where the employee is quarantined or is out for their own purposes. Next slide. If they're a tier 1, meaning they're caring for somebody else, our credit is limited to $200 per employee per day. If it's tier 2, its credit is limited to $511 per employee per day, up to the cap. Plus, we can take a credit for any qualified health plan expenses that are allocated to the emergency paid sick leave. Next slide, please. What are those other qualified health plan expenses? Basically, obviously, we need to track those so that we can claim them. We're waiting on guidance on how to specifically calculate the credit, but things that may be looked at as far as qualified health plan expenses is our portion of the premiums, especially if it's a self-insured plan. And if individuals go on COBRA, then basically we may be able to be subsidized for any COBRA expenses related to this. Next slide, please. How does this work? Basically, we get a credit, basically, if our amount of money that we pay in connection with FCCR benefits exceed our FICA tax owed. And the key here is that when we're looking at whether or not our credit claim or the amount of payments that we've made exceeds, we need to first look at all the other tax credits we get on that same amount of money, because we're not going to be allowed to double dip. We also need to see whether or not the credit claim actually has increased the amount of our gross income, because if it does, then we can't claim the credit. Next slide, please. Okay, so basically, we can, in fact, retain the amount of money that we would otherwise pay in payroll taxes. If it's not sufficient to cover the cost of paid leave, we can get an expedited advance from the IRS for any monies that we paid in addition to what we can claim. We've received some guidance on this, and basically it's a very streamlined process in order to claim these benefits. Next slide, please. Okay, the new CARES Act basically has indicated that we can, in fact, get an advance on the amount of money that we've actually paid that exceeds our payroll tax credit. And the CARES Act has indicated that we will not be penalized for failure to make our deposit of payroll tax if such failure was in anticipation of getting the tax credit generated from the payment made to employees who have taken paid sick leave. Next slide, please. All right, here's how it works. If we paid, for example, $5,000 in qualified sick leave benefits, but we're required to deposit $8,000 in payroll taxes because we did have other people working while other people were on leave, then we can use up to that $5,000 of the $8,000 as a credit in order to offset what we paid to the people on leave. We would then, of course, be required to pay the remaining $3,000 on the people who did not go off on that leave. Next benefit, or next slide, please. What happens if we pay more in sick leave benefits than we have in our payroll taxes? For example, if we pay out $10,000 in the qualified sick leave and we were required to deposit $8,000 in payroll taxes, we can use all of that $8,000 that we had in payroll taxes as a credit, and we can file a request for an expedited advance on an accelerated credit for the remaining $2,000 on the IRS form. Next slide, please. General rules. This is effective until December 31st. It will go into effect April 3rd. And basically, the government will make up the impact on Social Security through the general fund of the federal government. Next slide, please. Our firm has on our website a coronavirus resource center. This is the link to that. We have answers to a variety of different questions that you may have. So please feel free to access this to look at how to comply with the FFCRA. Next slide, please. Well, that's it for my presentation.
Thank you, Grant. We do have some questions here. The first is they have an employee that's staying home because they have publicly exposed a police officer partner. Their partner is taking people's temperatures at the airport. Is this person eligible for any of the leave reimbursement plans? Neither they nor their partner have exhibited any symptoms.
Okay, so it depends on where the individual is located, but because we've got shelter at home orders from Hillsborough and Pinellas County and a lot of other counties throughout Florida as well, they potentially may be eligible. However, the FFCRA is pretty strict on that. The isolation has to be because of a healthcare provider indicating that the individual needs to be staying at home and or because of a specific governmental order to do so.
Okay, and there's another question. Does the daycare or school have to be closed through a mandatory order, or can it be closed through a voluntary closure?
It can be closed because of a voluntary closure if the shelter in place or other orders provide that option to the school or the daycare center.
Okay, and do you have to keep employees for a period to get the paid sick leave reimbursement?
No. Basically, the key here is that if at any time you need to close down your business or to have layoffs, et cetera, you still have the ability to do that. But any benefits that the employees are entitled to up to that point, they're entitled to and they should be paid.
And can an employee still receive E-FMLA if they can work from home?
No. The key here is that anytime the employee can work is not counted towards either the paid sick leave or the E-FMLA. And so basically that needs to be carved out of the equation. If, for example, as I mentioned, you can take intermittent E-FMLA, which means you don't get it while you're working, but then you do get it while you're off because you're not working for COVID-19 reasons. And so we need to take a look at both if they're working and not working, and it's only if they're not working that they're entitled.
Okay, and you may have answered this one. If the employee has been asked by their employer not to return to work due to contact with a possible COVID-19 person until that possible COVID-19 test results return, do they qualify for paid sick leave? Okay,
this is the gray area because basically what's happening is the employer is mandating that the individual stay home for COVID-19 reasons. That's not technically covered under the FCCRA, but it's my feeling that ultimately it's going to be determined that if the employer mandates it, then basically they're admitting that the employee should be remaining at home because of reasons that would in fact may trigger the FFCRA. And so basically we need to be careful if we're making the decision to allow people to stay home, because it's very likely that it will qualify for FFCRA benefits, even though technically they're not covered now.
Okay, and if these are not considered wages, will workers' comp tax be exempt from this as well?
Yeah, we haven't gotten the guidance on the workers' comp, but it's only the payroll taxes that are going to be affected by it. And so it's unclear at this point in time whether or not unemployment compensation or workers' compensation will be impacted by these payments.
Does state or local quarantine or isolation order also include a statewide mandatory probation of the employee's job to prevent the spread of the virus? For example, the medical industry is no longer allowed to perform elective non-emergency procedures, resulting in the employee no longer being able to work.
Okay, if it's lack of work, then no benefits are being paid. It's very specific. They need to be absent because of a COVID-19 reason. It's either because they need to be quarantined or they're seeking treatment or they're taking care of somebody who is at home because of a COVID-19. So lack of work will not qualify that employee.
And can someone apply for unemployment during E-FMLA?
The answer is no. Basically, if you're getting any of these benefits, it will delay eligibility for unemployment compensation. But once the benefits end, then that person will be eligible for unemployment compensation.
Okay, and thank you, Grant. Do you have anything additional to add?
No, not at this time, other than to say that if anybody has any additional questions, my email address is on the presentation, which will be made available to everybody. Please feel free to email me and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Next up, we have Christina Davenport from JMI Resource. Christina has over 25 years of experience in staffing in the manufacturing and hospitality industry. Her and her husband are currently the owners of JMI Resource located in Lutz. Since the inception of their company, they have opened additional offices in Sarasota and Jacksonville. JMI now places over 300 employees in jobs throughout the state of Florida and has been providing staffing solutions to its clients for over 15 years. Her primary focus has been on the recruiting, human resources, and administration side of the business. As the current president of the Bay Area Manufacturers Association, Christina strives to support our local manufacturers by providing them with an association where they can learn about manufacturing related topics through networking, tours of our manufacturing members, roundtables, as well as many other areas. Christina also enjoys being part of her church choir and spending time with her family. So Christina is going to present next, and we do have a poll that we would like you to answer. So we're going to go ahead and put this poll question up. If you would please go ahead and answer this.
Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome. And the first poll is, have you reduced or increased your staff?
That should be whether you're hiring or laying off.
Okay. You know what, unfortunately, I don't have that one up.
Okay, that's it. Have you reduced or increased? Okay, thank you. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As you know, we are in some different times right now, and whether you're hiring or you must lay off, clear communication is absolutely necessary in this time. If you can answer that poll, I'm trying to see where I can, Beth, can you see the results as to what percentage has answered so far?
Yes, it's 13% yes, 85% no, 15, so about 14–15% yes, 85% no.
Okay, I'll give it another 15 seconds here. If you can respond to that, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
But hiring has changed as we go into this new time of life. And there we are. Have you reduced or increased your staff? Yes, some have, and no, others haven't. And I've actually taken some time to investigate or to ask some of our BAMA members, as well as some others that I have communication with on the manufacturing side. And they have stated the same thing. It's kind of mixed as far as who is reducing or increasing their staff. So it's a mixed blessing right now. But hiring has changed. Some of the changes that have taken place through our manufacturers is they have changed to an outside location, meaning outside of their facility, maybe putting up a tent or something like that to do the interviews outside of the facility. Some have moved to remote or video, which may actually become the new norm in some situations. They've specified a specific room within their facility that the interviews will take place, so that when the interviews are done, they can go in and disinfect that room. They have limited the number of people that are coming into the interviews, so they do not have any group interviews any longer. It's just the smaller groups, so that they can maintain the requirements mandated. Specific times, there's no more walk-ins. They are specifying times as to when they can come in, or if they're doing it via the web base, they're setting specific times for them to come in for that interview. And again, keeping that limit to how many people can come in. Other things that they've done is pulling people from another plant or location to fulfill the needs. They have done that so that they don't have to hire or release. They're trying to accommodate as many people as possible. Some of the facilities are being deep cleaned at this time. Maintenance is becoming a key item that they take care of during this time of either no hiring or slowed down business. However, this is a prime opportunity for manufacturers in the sense that there are others that are not working or have been laid off due to the restaurants or hospitality. So it's a prime opportunity for candidates that are still looking for work, want to work from the retail and hospitality industries. However, our manufacturers have to be willing to train them into a new career because they don't have that experience. So if we are willing to train them into those new positions, this is going to be a prime opportunity to get the education out there of what our manufacturers do, and that it is a position that is a career and not just a job. Right now, there's more than 100,000 military and spouses that are out there looking for work. So that's another key area that we can pull from to bring in and hire if we're in the hiring phase. So thank you for that first poll, Beth. If we can move into the next one. All right, what percentage have you reduced or increased your staff? Again, this will be an interesting information as we have I see about 88 people on this call. So whether you're in manufacturing or an associate member, please answer the question and I'll give it a few seconds here. Again, whether or not you have to increase or reduce your staff in the number of days or hours, clear communication is absolutely necessary. Some of the ways that our current manufacturers are maintaining their current workforce is they have been able to move their office team remotely so that they're not having to come into the office and they're working remotely. And some of their managers and supervisors that can work from home are doing so as well. They have switched into split shifts and staggered breaks so that, again, reducing the number of people that are at the facility to maintain those guidelines of maintaining 6 feet or more apart, and staggering the breaks so that not everybody is in the break room having lunch or their break time at the same time, and then cleaning those facilities as soon as the breaks or the shifts are making the change. Another thing that you can do is make yourself visible to your employees. Let them know that you're still there, you're still in this as well. Also, be prepared to make a contingency plan just in case things do, the what ifs happen. Just in case things change, make sure you have a contingency plan in place. And if you are hiring, please let Beth know so that she can post it on the BAMA website. There is an area there that we have available to our manufacturers to be able to list any positions that we have open. Again, we have some manufacturers that have gone down So increased, 10% have increased, 11% have increased their staff, 11% has decreased. So we're kind of even, and 79% has not made changes in staff at all. So those are some good numbers. I was expecting them to be higher, but those are some good numbers for us. If you've decreased that staff, understand those that are increasing their staff. Let's help those that are without work right now and get that information out to our members, that we can make sure that we know who is hiring so we can flow those folks over. Again, with the influx of people coming in from the retail and hospitality, we also have some of the upper skilled positions. There's someone from logistics and inventory management that has been let go and he's looking for work. So if we are able to put these folks into different manufacturers that are working and then also pull in those retail and hospitality positions and give them a new career in manufacturing, that would be great. Beth, the next poll, please. How are you communicating with your staff about COVID-19? Web-based, social media, email, phone calls, or phone tree? Again, no matter how we look at it, communication is the key that is going to help us get through this. Web-based, I know they've been Zoom, WebEx, Skype, FaceTime. Actually, they've done FaceTime or Skype interviews as well, or just simple phone calls for interview processes to begin with. Give it a few seconds left on that one. that poll, Beth, and then if you could close that one, that would be great. All right, so we are moving to web-based, 26%, social media, 3%, email, 28%, phone calls, 15%, and other would be 28%. So don't know what that other is, but that's still great that we're communicating with our staff. Again, making sure that you communicate with them what is going on is going to be a great opportunity for you to build that trust with your staff, with your team. Also have compassion. Understand that there are fears out there. The media is doing a great job of giving us information, but it's causing a lot of fears. Educate them more than what the media is doing. For an example, we had an employee who was had no direct contact with an individual whose wife had been in contact. So this is 3 people down, and they had not been tested for COVID-19. Did not have direct contact, was in the same building as someone, but again, not knowing what that definition of direct contact was, he thought that he was in a very compromising position, whereas he may be susceptible to that COVID-19. So by going on the CDC website and getting the details and getting that information over to him, for not only him, but for the team that he has working underneath him, was very helpful and did alleviate some of his fears. Again, those numbers that are out there are staggering, but we also need to make sure that we have compassion, because there are fears that are out there with our team members. Just remember and think of how you would like to be treated in a time like this. We just want to make sure that we are treating our team and our staff the same way that we would want to be treated. Culture. These are new times, and with everything going on, you're going to need to remember the culture that you have created within your organization. Stay true to it. Things are changing a bit, and it may change your culture just a tad, but make it for the better. Considering if you have a family atmosphere, remember your core values, faith, hope, respect, integrity. Make sure you maintain those throughout this time that we're going through. And in closing, please remember to communicate with your team. Have compassion with them. Let them know that you're in this together. It will go a long way, and be mindful of the culture that you have created. If you need help or have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here to assist you in any way, shape, or form that I can. And have faith. We will get through this together as a team. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was very, very helpful. We did have another question, and it might be something suited more to Grant. Are bonuses a part of the employee's salary? If Grant is still on and you want to address that, or Christina?
Yes, I'm still on. And the answer is yes, bonuses are going to be counted as part of the regular rate, so long as it's not a discretionary bonus. And basically, the difference between a discretionary and non-discretionary is if the employee needs to meet certain goals or metrics, then it's non-discretionary and needs to be calculated as part of the regular rate.
Okay, thank you, Grant. And if anyone has any more questions for Christina, please go ahead and in the question box. And if we don't get to it today, we will email you with the answers to those questions. There is another question. What is the difference from the cap of 511 for a day and 100,000 a year?
Grant, I'm deferring to you.
For the paid sick leave.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What is the difference from the cap of 511 a day to 100,000 a year for the paid sick leave?
Okay. Well, the cap is $5,110 for the ultimate aggregate cap. So I'm not sure where the $100,000 comes into play.
Okay, we'll get more clarification, and we can get back to her on that. We're going to move right along. So next we're going to introduce Malia Powers. Malia has a solid executive experience across many industries. She combines strategic and tactical sales marketing, and engineering expertise with strong qualifications in developing and expanding market share, market campaign creation and implementation, engineering design and implementation, operation management, and sales. She's skilled at developing strategic alliances with business partners, negotiating and implementing product promotions. She also holds a record of increasing year-over-year sales by as much as 300% during current industry decline. She developed and hosted training conferences and seminars for executives and sales staff in the distribution industry. She has extensive knowledge of the HVAC and engineering, manufacturing, distribution, and real estate industries, with additional expertise in industrial, commercial, and residential inspections, internal air quality, and green sustainability. So Malia is going to discuss how you can leverage marketing at this time. I'd like to introduce Malia at this time.
Hi, everybody. Malia Powers. On the screen, it says I'm Christina, but I'm actually Malia Powers, the Vice President and owner of Power on Marketing. So during marketing and a downturn economic shift with fluctuation of supply and demand as it is today, looking at ways to shift and adjust your business. When I think of what's happening currently today, one of the things that we focus on is a way to navigate situations and look at companies like General Motors, for instance. They had to make adjustments in instead of making cars, because people aren't buying cars, they made an adjustment to create respirators, keeping their teams aligned, making their brand image look as that captain in the industry, holding together their employees and doing the betterment for the American people. And of course, they're here to make sales. And then we look at locally, take Three Daughters, a beer brewery. Instead of making beer, they turned to make hand sanitizer and gave out hand sanitizers to the community, generating short-term revenue, helping out the community when everyone was looking for hand sanitizer. Once again, leading in the community. So there's ways to shift and adjust your business and ways to talk about your story to be able to create that brand image in the community, providing loyalty, and once again, driving revenue. Because after all of this is over and businesses are back to business as usual, you're still being able to streamline and take advantage of being a leader in the community. And that's ways that you don't want to give up on that client engagement. One of the biggest mistakes that we hear in marketing with our clients is that they want to go dark. Well, that's one of the biggest mistakes, is to go dark in a crisis situation, because clients may think that you are out of business, or they may think the likelihood of the brand being diminished, where instead to find ways to engage, to help the business, and to once again build that brand loyalty within the community. And lastly, the redirection of the event of the shutdown. Once again, in manufacturing, a lot of our manufacturing clients, we look for ways to redirect their business to protect the employees. Christina gave some prime examples of her polls, which is great to see that people are keeping and maintaining business as usual, and there's still people hiring as well. That's ways to, if you're switching to a critical service product, or ensuring that you're keeping your teams uplifted and keeping that communication solid and alive, that your company is doing whatever it can to protect and preserve when the businesses are back to usual, back to the way it will become. It's nice to see that that marketing is not lost and you're keeping your brand alive. So hopefully that gave a couple quick insights to making sure that you're looking for ways to shift and adjust your business and keeping your company and your employees feeling very rest assured that that engagement is still around.
Okay, thank you, Malia. Does anyone, if you have any questions for Malia, please go ahead and type those into the chat box. I appreciate you coming on and updating everyone today, Malia. Grant, I do have a few other questions for you. It's the question from previously. They had said employees are capped at 100,000 a year for paid, or 100,000 K for paid sick leave. That's where she got that number from.
Okay, it's actually depending upon there's an aggregate of $10,000 for the E-FMLA, and there's an aggregate of the $5,110 for the paid sick leave. So again, I'm not quite sure where the $100,000 is coming from. There may be some caps in other laws that are applicable, but not the FFCRA.
Okay. And it said, you said that lack of work due to lack of sales doesn't apply for the FFCRA's EPSL, but will the SBA loan paycheck protection program apply?
No, basically the CARES Act basically is incentivizing employers to keep employees employed. And so the loans are going to be available to manufacturers if they keep their employees employed and pay them during that time period. So basically, we're also required to keep the same number of employees working as we had before the coronavirus issues arose. And so there are certain requirements that we need to meet in order to get that money.
Okay, thank you. Can an employee take the 2 weeks now, and if the COVID-19 reappears in the fall, take it again?
The answer at this point is no. It's a one-time only. Once you take your 2 weeks, you've exhausted it, and you cannot use it for any other COVID-19 reasons in the future. Having said that, obviously, it's always up to Congress to pass something new in the fall that may be applicable, but the current law does not apply for future paid leaves if an employee exhausts the 2 weeks now.
Okay, and some clarification on the 100,000 is the cap on the salary for the FFCRA for the emergency loans. The loan amount is determined based on 2.5 months of average employee salaries over the past 12 months, and it's capped at 100,000 for everyone's salary.
Right. Okay. That's the CARES Act. It's not the FFCRA. Okay. So under the CARES Act, basically, we can get a loan of up to $100,000 per employee, and that's the cap. So the amount that's paid, basically under the paid sick leave, would count $4,000 for the CARES loan program. But it has nothing to do with the FFCRA itself and how that works, independent of the loan program.
Okay, thank you, Grant. We do have some upcoming webinars. April 3rd, Stimulus Plan, Insurance and Access to Capital. April 6th, Blockchain, Cybersecurity and Managed Liquidity. And then we have a Talent Development Series, April 7th, Online Training, Strategies to Develop Employees During a Time of Uncertainty. So we do have some additional webinars coming up. If there is a topic you're interested in, please let us know, and we'll try to find the appropriate experts to answer those questions and host those webinars for you. If you have any questions, additional questions, you can reach out to BAMA or to FloridaMakes. And again, this recording will be provided to all attendees within the next day. We thank you all for attending, and as you exit the webinar, we ask that you please complete the survey. We're seeking your feedback about how to improve these webinars and better meet your needs with topics of value to you. So thank you again to all of our presenters this afternoon and also everyone who has attended. Thank you so much.